I saw myself dead. So I saw that I died. And um, I remember there were people that were, wrapping me up in this white cloth. So I was taken to hell. I was taken to a place so dark that the moment you enter, you know you're never leaving that place. You know that there's no hope. You know that you're never gonna see your loved ones again. You know that you're here eternally. You're a horrible person and you deserve it. And immediately I started getting so scared because the first thing that the human instinct does when they want to leave a place that they want to be in is try to run. I couldn't run. I was fixed to my place, and I can tell that it was eternal. That there were people at an equal distance from each other. From me, I couldn't see anything. It was pitch dark, but your soul knows. And they were screaming for Christ. They were screaming for forgiveness. They were screaming for someone to come in and grab them. I lost it. I lost it. I started getting scared. In hell, it's way worse because you're in that place. Your feet are practically glued, pitch dark. You're hearing people getting tortured, and at the same time you're being convicted. You're being told that you're a bad, undeserving person, and that you're in hell. First people we call on when we need help is our family. You couldn't get to them. You don't know where you are.
Hi, and welcome to Touching the Afterlife. Our guest today is Fady. Fady had an out of body experience when he went to hell. You don't want to miss his experience and what happened with him. And he's going to share with us his story today. Fady, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's really a pleasure to be on your channel and to speak to your viewers. I think today we're going to learn something really amazing on the power of Christ, and I can't wait to share it.
I can't wait to hear. I know your childhood, you were in Kuwait and you were in a Muslim area. You were Muslim, but I think our viewers would be surprised to know that you had a Christian background. Why don't you start there?
Yeah, so prior to that conversion, I was raised and brought up in a Coptic Christian home. Very devout mother who goes to church and who takes us to church. So we didn't really miss out on learning about Christ as children. But what the problem was in my childhood was I grew up in a lot of domestic violence. And this is what changed the course of my life. Um, so as a kid, I was different than everyone else. So people can just sense that at school, and they don't like people who are different. They like people who fit in. And because I was different, they used to bully me on a daily basis. And it wasn't just like a few words here and a few words there that are hurtful. They used to physically bully me, and actually, it used to go to extremes where they used to wait for me under my house to beat me up, and that was not okay. And growing up, that was my life. That was my everyday. There was no breaks from it. It's every time I have to go to school, I have to, prepare for the, you know, for the horrible things that are coming. And that wasn't only it. So whenever I used to come back home, I used to get bullied in the morning, and then at home there would be a lot of domestic violence. So there was no rest really. There was always just violence in my life, and that created a lot of fear. So because of that, my grandmother, God rest her soul now, used to fly in from Egypt. And mind you, she never, yeah, like my grandmother never liked airplanes. She never liked getting on an airplane, and she used to get very scared to fly. But she used to fly just for us. And she used to, whenever she used to come, she used to stay with me for a prolonged period of time. She used to raise me. Actually, she raised me when my parents were away because my parents are doctors. So doctors, for anyone who has a doctor in their family, know that doctors are always busy. They're always stressed, and if they're at work, they're at work. If they're home asleep. So fast forward a couple years later, I hit 12 years old, and my grandmother passes away from breast cancer. And now let me tell you, Julie, there are two of the most valuable people in my life are my grandmother and my father. And when I lost my grandmother, that was me losing practically what I felt like was everything. Um, I lost the only person that could understand me, and who could decipher my feelings. So, I stopped I stopped uh, getting all the motivation. I stopped having all the passion for anything. I left church. I stopped going to church. She used to attend with me. She used to take me to Sunday school, and I after she was gone, I stopped going. I stopped going to church. I stopped going completely. Actually, I stopped. my faith levels dropped down, because my grandmother passed away. My grandmother is my mother's mother. My mother started getting more affected, and so the violence started increasing. Um, I used to go through a lot of physical abuse at home, from my mother, despite the fact that she was a devout Christian. That didn't take her off from all the violence that used to go on at home. Um, and because of the violence kept increasing, what ended up happening was I started becoming violent myself. I started using a lot of profane words, the words I used to hear from her. I started to use physical violence. I started to fight at school, which only made the problems worse. Um, and so I remember my grandmother as a child. She used to tell me, "Fady, if you need anything from God, you can always call him to him, and he can come. You can always ask for the Virgin Mary to come and be with you. She's appeared before, Fadi. She can appear to anyone." I always held that to my heart, and I remember when I was calling out to God through all this, nothing would happen. Obviously, I'm away from church, so that's another disadvantage. Obviously, faith is here. Faith is at its lowest at that point, and God for me didn't show up. God didn't show up. The Virgin Mary didn't show up. Nothing showed up. The only thing that was showing up that was actually more like guaranteed was the violence at home, every single day, and that was very debilitating on my mind. And so I stopped going to church when I was, yeah, I just she passed away when I moved schools. So in my mind, in the back of my head, I thought, hey, when I move a school, I'll, meet new people. These people will not know the people that I was with, so maybe they won't bully me. Maybe I can start to make a good impression. And bam, my grandmother passes away. I cry every day at school, and then they start to bully me too. Um, so graduating, so I graduated high school when I was 16. I entered university straight after that, when I was 16 as well. So um, I remember, entering university, Julie, when you're 16. It's first off, you don't have, as a 16-year-old, probably any lack of judgment. You don't have any judgment. You lack judgment. You lack awareness, and teenagers are very curious to try everything. And that was a recipe, Julie, for disaster. Because when I entered university when I was 16, I met a group of people who were very bad. They were very bad people, and they were heartless. They were selfish people. What they used to do on a daily basis was horrible, and they were into drugs. They were into fornication, um, anything bad that you can imagine. And guess who got along? Got in with them? Myself. And unbeknownst to me, I was taken with their waves. Um, I started doing a lot of things that are bad. So I started getting in with women. I started getting in to selling drugs. I started doing a lot of things. And mind you, I already had a damaged home, so it didn't feel like it mattered. Because the only reason why I started to do all this was because I remember when I was a kid, um, my father and my mother were arguing, and my mother is usually the instigator. She's usually the person who starts. And this fight, so my parents' fights at least last for 5 hours, and that alone is insane. So I remember it went from 8 p.m. all the way to 6 a.m. And my dad was incredibly tired. He walked into the bathroom just to wash his face, and when he walked into the bathroom at 6 a.m., he fainted, and actually his heart stopped beating because of the stress and because of the overwhelming situation. And I remember as a kid, I got down and I jumped on my dad and I was screaming on top of my lungs. The last person who I wanted to leave was my dad. And I remember my mom, by the grace of God, my dad woke up. They took him to the ICU. He stayed there for a couple of days. And I remember my mom, when she used to go and visit him, come back, she used to tell us as kids in the living room, "Hey, when your dad goes or when your dad dies, not if, when. It's a matter of when. You're gonna go back to Egypt." Egypt for me was like a 10th world country because I never lived there. I didn't know the language. I didn't know anything. And we're gonna go have, you're gonna have three things. You're gonna have a roof over your head. You're gonna go to school, and you're gonna eat. That's it. There's nothing else that you're gonna do. And that put fear in me. That planted fear in me because I'm going to a country I don't know. I'm not gonna be free. My dad's not gonna be alive, and that was very scary. That was very scary I believe when I was like an 8 or 9 year old. And so I always had the fear of not having enough money, and this is why I started to always try to do anything that I could to have extra money because I don't know when disaster strikes. And so that went on for a couple of years. Um, I graduated university when I was 20. So right before that, um, what happened was I firstly joined a group of people who were very devout Muslims. Big problem. One of them actually became a sheikh at the moment, so that's even a bigger issue because he had roots planted. And the second thing is, at the same time what this is going on, I had the option. So in university, Julie, in the American system, you obviously know this. There are things or options called electives, subjects that are optional that you can take um, in addition to your major subjects. And I had the option to pick between two subjects, and I had the option to pick between Spanish or, you guessed it, Islam. And I was like, you know what? I don't like to learn languages. I'll take the religion instead. I already don't care. I already started researching other religions. Let's see what they have to say. And wow, it's very shocking, Julie, to see how much sugar they put on everything. And I'm talking about Muslims. How much sugar they quote on that on everything. They show you everything so beautifully. They show you how they give their what they call zakat. So that's monthly donations to an Islamic center where they give out food to the poor. They show you how you should be peaceful to your wife, and they show you how to be loving and caring. And I was like, wow. And you pray 5 times a day, so you have a routine. So that was I was like, wow, that seems like a really, really good religion. Obviously, say that Satan is the biggest deceiver. Um, and that obviously was the religion of Satan. But at the same time, while going on, I was, in Kuwait or in any Middle Eastern country. For the viewers, or if you've ever heard Julie, they don't leave you alone since you were like when you're a child, Julie, you're constantly being told by your classmates and your roommates through their parents to convert to Islam. They always tell you that you should be a Muslim. Why are you a Christian? You're in a Muslim country. So I had that seed planted in me when I was a kid. Plus, I lived across the street from a mosque. Hearing the call to prayer 5 times a day, it stuck to my head, and so it felt so natural. So I
Yeah.
met this group of people, and these people, Julie, in the Middle East. I'm not sure if you're familiar, or if you've been, or if you know people who have. But maybe one of your viewers had. Um, in malls and in public areas, next to the restroom, there's a prayer room, and they put prayer rooms. They set up prayer rooms pretty much everywhere, and so whenever I'd be with my friends or we'd be hanging out, mind you, I was 21. I was 20, almost 2021. They would tell me, "Hey, Fady, just give me a moment. I'll go in, we'll pray, and then we'll go back and we'll continue what we were doing." I was like, "Fantastic!" So I had to wait for them for 10 minutes each time, and they pray a lot per day, Julie. Like especially those nighttime prayers, it's a lot. Um, and in that time that they're inside and I'm on my own, I'm having these thoughts like, "Wow, look at them. They're very organized. Look at them. They're very civil. They're going to pray, and look at what I'm doing. I'm doing nothing."
So, Fadi, you were saying that, you lost your grandma, you had domestic violence at home, you had been bullied, and the list goes on, and you weren't feeling any love at home. And they were off, and you were surrounded by this culture and religion. And so you felt like this was the next step for you. And this is, and they were having peace and love. And so you were drawn in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely true. Satan is the biggest deceiver. He is very smart. I'm gonna give it to him. He's been studying humans for the past 4 or 5 thousand years. He even tempted God. He tried to, at least. So he's a very smart character. I have to give it to that. So he tempted me, and he planned everything out meticulously, knowing my situation at home. He knows my situation when nobody's around. He doesn't hear your thoughts, but he can see your facial reactions. And he's very smart at that. So he set me up for disaster, basically. And disaster did strike. So one day I remember I was sitting at home, and Julia, I'm not proud of myself, but now that I'm back to Christ, I really feel that love feeling. That He's always with me. But back then, I remember I went crazy. So in the last stages of your losing your faith, I tried to grab onto Christ using anything that I could grab him on by. And one thing that I thought was gonna work was I used to draw the cross over myself like 40 times, thinking that if I each extra cross that I draw will increase the chances of Christ coming or me feeling something. I didn't feel anything. I said, "Glory be to God." You know, the same things we say at church. Nothing. And I got mad. I got enraged. I rarely get enraged. So I went. First thing I looked at the sky and I said, "God, I blasphemed." I said a lot of things that are not good. I can't really mention it. But probably you probably know. You can have a hint of that. And I told him, God, if you're not gonna be with me, then I don't want to be with you. I don't need you. Mind you, Julie, that I knew that Jesus is God, regardless. But I was just really mad. And thinking about it now, or recently, I did what Satan did when he was an angel in heaven. He wanted, he rebelled against God. He said, God, I don't need you. I'm better than you. And that's exactly what I did. And that's because,
Yeah.
Julie, it's like, at that stage, I was, being transformed from Jesus Christ's son to Satan's son. And that's a very, very, very big transition. And it's not a transition that happens overnight. It's something that Satan really has to work with over time. And that's what he was doing. So on the 5th of December, 2020, I decided to leave Christianity and pursue Islam. And I remember the first person I said that to was the friend that used to always go to pray. And she was happy. She was like, we got to tell everyone. We got to celebrate. And I was like, don't tell anyone yet. Just keep it between us. And no, that didn't happen. So Julie, like the week after, everyone knew, everyone like, and it was bad. Um, so so yeah, that's how Satan got me there. And so when I, you know, uh, became a Muslim, the first thing that anyone does when you're a Muslim is they take you to basically places. So basically, they teach you the rituals and they show you how to pray, and they take you with them. So they basically put you under their wing. And I remember Julie, um, like uh they told me, Fadi, listen, congratulations, we're so happy for you. There's this Islamic center in Kuwait that teaches people about new converts or people who have the will to convert about Islam. So it's like perfect, let's go there. And so my friend took me to that place, and I met this guy, Julie. He's the definition of an extremist Muslim, absolutely extremist. And I remember he was talking to me. He was telling me, Fadi, listen, I lived in Europe for all my life, and I didn't feel home. I didn't feel safe. And in my back of my mind, I was like, why did you even go to Europe in the first place? You're a Muslim, technically. Um, and I remember he was so violent that he was telling me stories about him and his wife at home. How his wife is not Arab and she speaks English. I believe she's from the Philippines, and he divorced her. Actually, in the beginning, he was actually fighting with her because she used to speak to their kids in English, not Arabic. And he used to force her to speak Arabic because Arabic is the language of Islam. And honestly, I was taken aback. I was like, wow, this is violent, man. And I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to think. And I remember he started getting in with me on my parents. So he's like, Fadi, welcome to the family. Are your parents gonna be converting with you? It's like he's trying to sell. It's genuinely like it's not. He's trying to get his heaven points. Muslims have heaven points. So he's trying to get as much. It's like his commission or sales commission. I was like, no, it's only myself. And I remember his face was like, wait, so your parents are going to hell? I was like, what do you mean? He was like, your parents are going to hell because they didn't convert to Islam. And so Julie, I was telling you this earlier. I really love my dad, and imagining my dad in hell was very hard on me. And I remember it was very obvious on my face. And so I looked at him. I stared at him, and from that look, he knew that I was not okay. He was like, no, no, no. Like I told him, hey, so my dad's a really good guy. Why should he go to hell? And then he changed his words, and this is where deception comes in Islam. He was like, no, 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 Fadi, listen, he's going to go to hell, but he's going to be on the outskirts of hell. He's not going to feel pain. I was like, well, if that's the case, that's awesome. But at the time, looking at it, I didn't think much that it was pure deception. And I remember that one time he actually lost his job, or he wasn't satisfied with his job with the Islamic Center. Wow, very no pun intended. And he was talking to me actually looking for a job. And between me and myself, now that I think, like, why didn't he ask God to help him? Um, Islam teaches you about worldly things, not about heavenly things. And so, fast forward, during that whole time, I was out of my family's house. I moved out, like, as soon as, because I didn't want to practice Islam in their presence. Coptic Christians are very devout Christians, so you can't just pray in an Islamic way or do Islamic things in your Coptic home. That's not normal, especially with the violence that was going on. That wasn't a good addition. So I moved out. And when I moved out, I first lived with my friend's house, and I remember at my friend's house, he lives next to his family, and so one time, um, I was at his house. We were having dinner, and then a really, really beautiful girl walks in, and I fell in love. And that girl, Julie, was a completely veiled woman. She had her face was visible. That's why I was like, wow. But everything else was covered. And we started to actually talk to each other, and we started to get to know each other, and we started getting to we got into a relationship. And now I wanted to get married to that girl. Um, and I was very, very, very keen on that. I was, trying to talk to her dad, trying to talk to her mom. You're doing everything to get to know that girl. And I remember, I wanted to prove to her dad so much that I was a hard worker. I was 21 at the time, so how these teens think that thought I was thinking exactly. And I remember I the first thing I did, Julie, was I went to her dad and I was like, I want your daughter. And he was like, okay. Um, so what is gonna? So they all know the story. Now my story is spreading fast, and they were like, okay, so what's gonna guarantee me as a father of my daughter that you're not gonna go back to Christianity once you marry her? I was like, I'm not. I don't like Christianity. I hate Christianity. Matter of fact, I actually did. Like, I wasn't just saying this to satisfy him. I actually hated on Christians. I started hating on them whenever I saw a video of a Muslim converting to Christianity. I used to say to myself and to my friends, like, he's so stupid. He's so stupid. How this guy is just becoming a non-believer like that. He's dumb. And I was like, you know what? You hold on to that for a second. So the next day I went, told the guy at the center that I wanted to convert my papers. And I actually went to court, changed my documents. And I went to him. I was like, hey, does this satisfy you now? And I remember actually things didn't work out between us. And that drove a lot of issues in the family, a lot of issues with my friend. And so that was that. Um, but that actually, so at one point, Julie, so this is the start of when my experiences happened. I was trying to prove to her dad that I was a hardworking guy. And the first thing that I did was, not only just get a job, but I did my best to get a job in the top companies. And I did. And those corporates, Julie, they squeeze you so hard. They squeeze your time, they squeeze your effort, they squeeze everything. And I'll give you a little bit of a fact. Um, I was born as a kid with high cholesterol, and I also inherited and developed through the stress of the bullying and everything, high blood pressure. Now that was a recipe for disaster when you work really hard and you stress yourself. So one day I remember I was sitting with my manager and we were, working. So I was an auditor. For those who don't know, auditors have to work long hours checking, making sure that everything matches and that, the company that you're auditing is not violating any laws. We were sifting through the papers and I could hear, so in the back, I could hear someone talk to another person telling him, hey, you guys have a really, so it was a Christian talking to a Muslim, telling him that he has like Islam is very organized and that they pray, and that he wishes that Christianity was the same. Um, so in the back of my head, I was like, wow, this guy, why doesn't he just convert to Islam? Why is he just sitting there and complaining? What an idiot! I had a very, very violent mind. I was going into the extremist path, and I remember we went to pray that day, and right after prayer, Julie, God started to do the first strike. So I was sitting in my chair, I was working, and then suddenly I felt this heart pain, and it was not a pain that is usual. So obviously it needed attention. So I went to my manager. I was like, "Hey, I'm not feeling too good. I need to see a doctor." He was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I have really bad heart pain, and I need attention." And so, excuse me, and he was like, "Okay, we'll get that for you." And I remember my coworker, who was also my very good friend from childhood, what came to me. Kuwait is a very small country, so you can see people, driving on the freeway. Um, and she came to me, and she took me to the clinic. And we went to the clinic, and the doctor started to ask me about my history, and I started to tell him. And I remember he was so shocked. He was like, "What are you doing here? You should go to the hospital." Not here. We don't have the equipment to treat you if anything goes wrong. And I remember they called the ambulance. They whisked me off to the hospital. I'm sitting on the gurney in the observation room, like waiting on them to check my vitals, to give me my meds and everything. And suddenly, Julie, I had this vision that of complete darkness and complete, like you can't see anything. And there's a huge slithering green snake, huge, and I can tell that snake was gonna wrap itself around me and devour me. And that was hell. So I knew in myself that that was hell, and I'm gonna go there if I die in my present state. And obviously, Julie, like I don't know if I was stubborn or whatnot, but I brushed it off. I didn't care. I was in Islam. They call this barzakh, or your temporary place, your purgatory. So I was like, yeah, whatever. It probably is purgatory or something along the lines. I didn't really think too much about it. Put it under the carpet and went on with my life. And 2 weeks later, I remember I was visiting my old coworkers, and all my old coworkers played a very huge role in helping me convert and helping me learn about Islam. They used to teach me how to pray. They taught me how to recite. They taught me a lot of things. So I went to visit them, and I remember I was sitting with one guy, and I remember he's considered a very devout Muslim, very not extremist, not this guy. But I remember he asked me, he told me, "Are you praying all your prayers? Like, are you doing your Islamic duties?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I am." Mind you, I didn't really care about praying. So I told him, I do. And suddenly, Julie, when I said that, I felt very tired. I felt like my heart was racing. I felt like something is wrong. And so I excused myself. When I was driving, I was on the way home. And suddenly, Julie, this is kind of God's work. I see this huge dust storm approaching. And Julie, I don't know if you've seen what a dust storm likes coming in from a distance, but it looks like the apocalypse. And we had this a lot in the Middle East, especially in Kuwait. So I started getting even more stressed. Started getting more panicked. So I drove myself to the hospital, barely, and they whisked me off again to the observation, put me on the gurney. They're giving me my IVs, and they left me for a while. And again, I get this warning because Jesus warns before he strikes. And I get this same vision. Darkness. There's a huge slithering green snake. Huge. It's humongous, Julie. And you just know that it wants to devour you, and that is hell, and you're gonna go there if you die in your present state. Your soul knows. And I brushed it off. Now I can't be more arrogant than that, right? I couldn't be more uncanny like that than that. And
Wait, did you say, Fadi, that this was a second vision of a snake, or this was
second,
the twice now?
it's twice. So God gave me two kind of visions, warning me that if I die in my rebellious state, that I will be in hell. And um, I always believe that God warns before He strikes. But the third time, though, Julie, that's when the real experience happened. Um, and it was anything but nice. It was very scary. So I remember one day I was sitting alone at home. I live alone. I lived alone at that time, and I remember my friend was bored, so he was driving on the way to my house at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I remember he reached my house and his battery died. Now that's not normal for a car's battery to die suddenly, but it died. And I remember being 3 in the morning, there's nobody on the streets, you can't get any help. So I told him, "Hey, you're more than welcome to crash at my house. And I'll just be asleep because I have work tomorrow. And then, when it's morning, we'll get your stuff sorted." And he was like, "Fantastic. Sounds like a perfect plan." He came over. I went to bed. He was staying in the living room playing PlayStation because, 21-year-olds. And I remember I went to sleep, so I was completely dark in my room. The moment I closed my eyes, Julie, I had this I don't know what it was. It was a vision, it was a body, but I saw myself dead. So I saw that I died. And um I remember the people there were people that were, wrapping me up in this white cloth. So in Islam, when a Muslim dies, you get wrapped around something called what they call a kafan. A kafan is like this piece of cloth that they fully cover you with, and it's white, and it's to show that you're cleansed from your sins when you die, or something along the lines. And I remember they were wrapping me up in this kafan, and that they were putting me on this bed or this thing that they carry. I don't really know the proper word for it, the proper term, but they were putting me on that bed. They were carrying me to my grave. And I remember I saw um, everyone there, Julie, was not my family. My dad wasn't there. My mom wasn't there. My brother wasn't there. Nobody was there. That alone was a very weird feeling. So the people burying me were taking to me to this grave, and I remember it was pre-dug, already ready for me to get put in. And they put me in. They put the sand, or yeah, the sand over my body. That's the tradition in Islam. And the moment they left and they walked out of that grave, I was taken to hell. I was taken to a place so so dark that the moment you enter, you know you're never leaving that place. You know that there's no hope. You know that you're never gonna see your loved ones again. You know that you're here eternally. You're a horrible person and you deserve it. And immediately I started getting so scared because the first thing that the human instinct does when they want to leave a place that they want to be in is try to run. I couldn't run. I was fixed to my place, and I can tell that it was eternal. That there were people at an equal distance from each other. From me, I couldn't see anything. It was pitch dark, but your soul knows. And they were screaming for Christ. They were screaming for forgiveness. They were screaming for someone to come in and grab them. And when I heard that, Julie, I lost it. I lost it. I started getting scared. I started. I don't think I screamed, but I was at that, like, fear here on Earth, Julie. If you ever go to a dark neighborhood on your own, maybe run down, you'd feel like your heart's racing and you feel like you're in danger because something might pop out of nothing and come and harm you, and you don't know where to go. But on in hell it's way worse because you know you're in that place. Your feet are practically glued. It's pitch dark. You're hearing people getting tortured, and at the same time you're being convicted. You're being told that you're a bad, undeserving person, and that you're in hell. And at the same time, obviously, Julie, the first people we call on when we need help is our family. You couldn't get to them. You don't know where you are, and practically you're never gonna see them again.
So
And
you're having an experience, Fadi, of complete and utter torment, complete and utter fear. You can't see anything. You're all alone.
yeah,
It's like the maximum anxiety and fear times a million, it sounds like.
yeah, wouldn't wish it on my enemies. Worst one.
Whew.
Yeah. Um, it was scary. Uh, and there's no escape. So that was the worst part. That you can't escape. It's your destiny. It's your eternity, and there is no time. So that's even more scary. You don't know anything. You're completely shut off from the world. And that alone was something that's indescribable. No matter how many times I tried to sit down and try to paint a picture for you, I cannot get my words right. Um, so I don't know if you want me to continue or we take a break, but it's
Yeah.
completely up to you.
Now, let me ask you a question
Yeah,
here.
please.
So I just want to get this very clear. You are now practicing Islam and you had this hell experience or vision.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened from there?
So I'm in that place, hearing people scream, and suddenly I wake up. And it wasn't like a wake up, it was more like when you have a really bad dream and you just wake up in shock. Um, that was my reaction. I woke up and I was drenched in sweat. I was sweating like it felt like I guess I got into a shower and into the bed or however you want to describe it. I was sweating really bad. And I remember my heart was beating beyond because of my blood pressure, beyond fast. And I quickly jumped out, opened the door, went to the living room, went to my friend, and I told him, "Hey, I need to go to the hospital now." And my friend saw how startled I looked, and he knows my history, and he saw how tired I was. And he was like, "Okay, just give me like 4 minutes." I was like, "Now, now, we need to go right now," because Julie, that fear of dying and going back to that place was real. I don't know what dying feels like on an earthly world, so I'm afraid that any moment I would just die and go back to the place that I was in. Which is hell. That's nobody wants to go there. So I was pretty kicked. I remember I ran down. I was on the first floor, so I ran down the stairs. I didn't even wear my shoes. I was out running on the streets in my socks. Anything just to not get back to that place. And I remember, so the first thing, my friend was obviously running after me. He was trying to catch up with me. Um, I remember I went and I saw this police car under the house, by the pharmacy. We had a pharmacy. And I went up to the cop and I was like, "Hey, I really need to go to the hospital. Please take me." And he was like, "We can't do that. It's not in our protocol. We have to call an ambulance." And the moment he said that, I didn't even tell him thank you. I didn't even tell him like, "Okay, please," or even beg him anymore. My friend was like, "Leave it, drop it. Let's go to my car." He forgot that his own car's battery was dead. And I remember we walked into his car. I completely forgot. He completely forgot that his battery was dead. He went in. He presses the start button, and the car starts working. The
Wow.
car starts working, and it didn't even, like, take it 10, 15 seconds of, attempting to start. No, it starts instantaneously. And I remember I was shocked. I was very shocked. I remember when we were driving off, he was looking at me, he was like, "Fady, God loves you." And he's a Muslim. But it's that feeling, what else could it be? You can't start the car's battery without another car's battery being, plugged into that and, jump starting. How can suddenly the battery work? It's God. And
Yes, and he was showing your friend that he loves you and he loves him.
exactly, exactly. He loves you, and that was the first kind of subconscious moment where I was like, okay, maybe God does love me. Maybe God does care for me, because this whole time I didn't really care about God. I I thought that He didn't care, so why would I care about Him? And so I remember we went to the hospital. The hospital was, funny enough, like a 2-minute drive from our house, and or my house. And I remember he had to drop me to find parking. Ran into the hospital, told the guy, "Hey, listen, I have an emergency. I need to see a doctor." I remember he told me, "All right, go up to the third floor, and there's where you'll find help." And I went to the third floor, went to the nurse, grabbed her. I was like, "Hey, nurse, you need to give me a beta blocker." A beta blocker is a medicine that I used to take that basically slows your heart down. Anyone with a heart condition, God bless their lives, would know that. And she was like, "No, we can't give you anything. The doctor has to come and check you." And I told her, "No, I need it now. My heart is racing." Mind you, Julie, my heart rate didn't go down not even one bit since that experience. And I remember they took me off to a room. They checked my vitals. They checked my what they would call in medicine electrical cardiogram, where they would check your, because the heart is basically works on electricity. God's hands. And they saw that I had a huge issue with my heart's electricity. They saw that my heart rate was beating so fast. And I remember the doctor at the same time was walking in. Now, Julie, before I tell you that, when they obviously have to lift your shirt to put in the wires, and when they lifted my shirt, they can see my veins beat from my stomach. That When I saw that myself, I was very scared, because that is not normal. That your veins in your stomach would beat. That's like your heart beating from your stomach. That's how someone would know that I was incredibly scared from what I saw. And I remember the doctor himself. I've never seen a heart doctor about to get a heart attack. He was sweating like really bad. I would never forget his face. And he was like, "We need to get him off to the resuscitation room. This is an emergency." So I remember they put me on the wheelchair. They take me to the resuscitation room. It's across from the room I was in, and they put me in. And they told my friend, "Don't come in. We're working." And it's serious when they tell your family or your friends, "Don't come in." And I remember, so both my parents, like I said, are doctors, so I anything that they're talking about terminology wise, I know, or at least I'm very familiar with. And I remember they plugged in, they inserted the IV in my veins, and they were administering drugs that are basically beta blockers, like I was saying, that will slow your heart down. I remember they gave me three different medicines, full dose of each, and nothing would get my heart rate down. And I remember the doctor. So Julie, when your heart rate is fast, your tongue gets dry because it's like you're running. It's like I was running a marathon. So I had a nurse. All her job was to put water in my mouth to get my mouth, to get me hydrated. Because at the same time this was going on, your heart is beating a lot of blood in your body. There's a lot of oxygen in your body, and I was actually over oxygenated, meaning that it's actually like close to oxygen poisoning. Anything of too much of anything is not good. Too much of water is not good. So I was shaking profusely. I felt really cold. My tongue was dry. I was in a very bad shape, and my heart rate was not going down. And I remember that was scary because I was looking at the sky and I was ready to leave at any moment. And I remember, so the doctor at the same time, he was the only cardiologist in the hospital at the time, which is weird. And he got a call from another wing at the hospital that some lady needed attention, and so he had to leave me. And he told the nurse, I remember I could see this with my own two eyes. He walked with the nurse, took him to the side, and showed him the defibrillator, the thing that shocks your heart. And he was telling him like, okay, if anything happens, you do this. And I remember he took the nurses with him because obviously he needs assistance, and I was left alone with that nurse that was putting water in my mouth. Now that was scary. That was very scary because like it feels like there's practically no hope in your situation. Um, the doctor himself looked like he gave up on you, and you're now left to die until, well, obviously the nurse attempts to get you back to life again. So I remember, you know, remember Julie, I told you I always knew that Jesus Christ is God. I just always thought that He didn't care about me. So I had to do my last. I had to, you know, I had to do anything to get out of my situation. And I remember I was alone with the nurse. I forgot the nurse even was there, from how scared I was. And I looked up to the sky and I was like, God, forgive me. Give me another chance. And I promise you, if you give me another chance, I'm going to be different and I'm going to be better. And Julie, right after I said that, 3 seconds later, my heart rate started to go down. And the sense of peace that I felt when I said that was absolutely insane. Um, to know that even doctors, you know, it, doctors can't really help, and the only person that actually helped, the real doctor, is Jesus. Jesus was the one that created our form, created our body. We're in His image, and He knows us in and out. And to know that Jesus Christ was the only person who could save you was something so, like, shocking to me in a good way. And I remember the nurse started calling the doctor. Hey, doctor, his heart rate started to go down. Come in. And before that, like 10 minutes ago, I remember they were telling each other like, if we give him the maximum dose of any of these medicines, we might risk his heart stopping. And it was amazing. Then and there, Julie, I knew that God does respond, or I at least realized that He's starting to respond. And this is where He started working in me. And I
Can I
remember,
just add
yeah,
here? I just
yeah,
wanna add here, Fady, it stands out to me that you had in your rebellious time, you felt God wasn't near, but He opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And when this was happening to you in the hospital, you were seeking Him finally from a pure and humble, desperate heart, and He responded.
yeah, on
Mm,
what could have been my deathbed.
mm.
So thanks be to the Lord, how He gives you a chance even when you're on your last breath. And this is what later made me realize that as long as we're alive, we have a chance. And no matter how wrong we do, no matter how many things we do that we know are not right, but as long as we have breath in us, God's giving us a chance. And that's something that we won't have for too long.
Yes.
Life is precious. Um, and where I was, where God took me to show me how why life is precious, I would not wish anyone to go there. And I always tell myself, if I could just save one human being from eternity, that would be amazing, because that would be probably everything. Because one life is extremely expensive to the Lord, and now we know why. And so continuing from there, I remember they unplugged everything. Everything was normal. I was just too tired to walk. They put me on a wheelchair into my dad's car. And my dad's a doctor, so he told me, "Hey, Fadi, let's take you to the hospital where I work. Let's see a cardiologist there. Let's get an opinion on what's wrong." So we went to the cardiologist over at the other hospital, and the cardiologist looks at me. He was like, "What is your nature of work?" I was like, "Why?" He was like, "You are very stressed." So I was like, "I'm an auditor." He was like, "Auditors, this is how stressed they are?" I thought they sit at the desk and just do papers. So I was like, "No." And he was like, he gave me an ultimatum basically. He was like, "2 weeks, you have 2 weeks. It's either you stop now or you die." From how stressed I was. And I remember, so at the time, obviously, I was still lost. I was still a lost sheep, but I just knew in the bottom of my heart that exists. And I remember I still had girls over. I still lived alone, and all of that. But I remember in one time I was sitting and I had this feeling that I wanted to travel. So actually, I traveled to Jordan on a holiday at the time. I was visiting my friends who are also part of the Islamic group. Didn't know why I did that, but I did that. And I remember before I traveled, I was talking to one of my friends and I was telling her, "Hey, don't tell anyone," because she's an atheist. So I told her, "Hey, don't tell anyone, but I left Islam. It's a very bad religion. It's stupid." And I remember she started saying, "Yeah, you're right. I agree with you. That's why I left too. That's why I'm an atheist now." And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "What are you?" I was like, "I'm a Christian." She was like, "Fantastic. That's great for you." So I got this kind of feeling of support from someone who was an atheist. Now I went to Jordan, Julian, and that trip alone was very crucial because I was alone most of the time, meaning I had chance to build and read. But at times I used to also hang around with those Muslim guys. So I remember this is how I knew that I started losing faith. It was Ramadan when I traveled to Jordan, and Ramadan is obviously a holy month where they do the rituals, they pray, they get together, whatever. And I remember they got into my so we were I was running a studio at the time, and my friends came over, boys and girls, and um, we wanted to pray. So Julie, in Islam, very nice fact, you're not supposed to pray next to women, and if anything, at worst, women will have to pray behind the man, not in front of the man. So we were all getting ready. There's something called like cleansing, or you just like how do I say it? It's called in Arabic wudu. And what does that do is you basically cleanse your body um, from head to toe before you pray. And if you touch a female, if you like shake her hand, your blessings go away. You have to go it again because women in Islam are actually classified as filthy. So this is another fact. So I remember I went to the bathroom to do the wudu, and I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I just like acted like I was doing it. Went out and I prayed, and this is when I knew that I didn't. I lost my passion for Islam, and I came back to Kuwait. I was so when I came back to Kuwait, I was picking up my friend from the airport, the same friend who was with me when in my situation, and I had a really bad car accident. Really, a very bad car accident that actually could have led to my death. I was on a freeway and on a car came and hit me on the side. The car was spinning, like nonstop, and it hit the barricade heads on. I remember the airbag went out and everything, and when I got out of the car, so where I crashed, there was no place for me to like whisk my car off into like a safe zone where the oncoming traffic won't like collide with you. I was somewhere where there was no safe zone, and so car on a freeway, your cars are going fast. So I immediately got out of the car and I started, trying to make out what was happening. And I was very dizzy. I wasn't feeling okay. Obviously, I hit my head, and the guy that hit me ran away. And Julie, the grace of God, how He wants to grab your attention. It's very important because at the time I still didn't really get practicing. I didn't know how to even go to church. I didn't know how people would react after seeing me. Like after seeing me, I'm not seeing me for 10 years. So I always had that fear of that reaction. and I didn't really want to go to church. I didn't even know how. I didn't know why. Whatever. So God grabbed my attention using that way, and I remember Julie. So the guy ran away. It was a very, to my own understanding, the car was completely lost. And what are the chances? What are the chances of your friend being in a car on the same freeway you're in, going into the direction you're going to? Very odd. Like
That is
0.001.
not a chance.
There's not a
That is
chance.
not a chance. That is God intervention.
God's intervention. So I remember he saw me for it, and what would guarantee, even if he saw you, that he'd stop? You're going at speed. So he saw my car, and he decided to pull up behind me. He came out and he was like, "Fatty, what's wrong?" I was very shocked. I haven't seen this guy in months, and I was tired. I was like, "Listen, someone crashed into me and he ran away." He was like, "Ran away? Which direction did he go?" I was like, "He went the direction that we were going in." And I remember he hopped into his car, Julie. He sped, and he got the guy's license plate, and he sent it to me. He was like, "That's the guy." I was like, "Yeah." Simply because the accident, the hit matches on the other car. And so that's how justice came to me, when it came to me getting compensated. Because had my friend not been there, I wouldn't have been compensated for anything. The guy ran away. And I remember at the time, obviously having no car, you're at home, there's not much to do, and this is when God starts to work with you again.
So
And
you're
I
starting to realize, Fadi, you're starting to realize that God is getting your attention more and more and drawing you to him.
Subconsciously, yes, not consciously, not a conscious level. You just know that there's
Okay.
something odd in a good way.
Mhm.
You just don't know what it is. And so when I was at home, um, God isolates you, Julie, for you to be able to differentiate His voice from the others. And I remember I was sitting down at home and I was telling myself, "Wow, I wish I." So I know, Julie, that in my community church there's a mass on Monday at 4 a.m. and barely anyone goes there. So I thought between me and myself that was a really good start. The only issue, Julie, is I didn't know where the church was because every time, even as a Christian, when I used to try to go there, I would get lost. It's in a dark place, so it's kind of scary at night, and I don't know anyone there, so I don't actually know the exact timings, or so I didn't know anything. So I just prayed in myself, not even a prayer, just like a thought. I was like, I wish I could go to the mass on Monday at 4 a.m. because first off, 4 a.m. my friends are not awake, so they wouldn't realize that I'm going to a church. Number two, it would be fantastic because there's barely anyone there, so it's a good way for me to start. And I remember, so put that thought behind me. I got hungry like how any human does, and I went to walk to the Carl's Jr. in front of my house. Now this seems funny and seems relevant, but actually this is how I want to show you how God really works lives. So I went there with a friend, and we were ordering, and the guy on the counter. Now, Julie, in Kuwait, just like a little bit of a fact, they're not so friendly. So not like in America where they'd have a conversation with you. They're very closed off, and they're very just get let's get your order done. So the guy behind the counter was talking to me. He was actually joking a lot with me. He was like, "Hey, you seem Egyptian. What's your name?" And I was like, he's Egyptian. He's Egyptian too, by the way. So he was like, "What's your name?" So I was like, My name is Fady." He was like, "Fady," and looks back, and I'll tell you why, Julie. So Fady is an Egyptian Christian name, and there are not a lot of Christians in Kuwait. So he's like, he looks at me. My friend finished his order. He's waiting on the table. He's looking, and us Coptic Christians, most of them have crosses on their wrist to signify. Back in history, Julie, they used to torture Christians and they used to make them pay tax for not being non-Muslims. And one thing that they used to do to torture the Christians was they used to make them wear a heavy necklace of a cross on their neck. So even when they're walking around, Muslims would see that there's a mark on their neck, on the back of their neck, and they would know that that person is a Christian. And they would mark the doors of Christians' homes with a huge cross. So anyone walking by the homes would know that that home is a Christian home. That was how much
Wow.
prosecution we used to have. And so because
I
of
did
that,
not know that.
yeah, very, very tough how Christ is always being, Christ's people are being attacked. So us Christians, us Coptic Christians, most of them would have a cross on their wrist, to signify the pain and to show everyone that they're strong. And so I remember he showed me his cross. He was like, "You're a Christian?" I was looking at my friends because I didn't want my friends to see. I was like, "Yeah, I am. I am a Christian." He was like, "Wow, it's the first time that I meet an Egyptian Christian here. I'm so happy that I finally met someone. I always wanted to go to the mass on Monday at 4 a.m., but I didn't have anyone to take me." And I was like, "Mass at Monday at 4 a.m.? That's where I wanted to go too." He was like, "Really? I know the servant there. Let's call him and let's go together." Now, this is not normal. God sent someone for me to take me to the mass, and for me to also help him go to mass. It's insane how God is so gracious, and the way he works is just beyond me.
and and personable.
Yeah, like I cannot thank him enough now that I look back at it. Because you're not in control. None of us. We all think that we're in control of what we do in life and our careers and our where we live. It's not. It's all God's, because the earth is the Lord's. And so I remember we go to mass, and the priests, funny enough, they were looking at each other because I was sitting on the benches, on the chairs actually, like on the back. And there was mass going on, and I remember the priests were looking at me, whispering to each other, like, "Who's this guy? He looks familiar." I look like my brother, so they thought I was my brother. Because they always used to tell my brother, like, "Hey, bring your Fady with you." They used to tell my parents, "Bring Fady with you." The priest would come to my house and try to take me, and I would kick the priest out of my room when I was not trying to go to church. And so I remember he was very I remember the look on their face was was very weird. And one of the prayers, Julie, that I prayed in mass was, "God, I want you to take everyone that is bad and that is harmful away from my life." And right after mass, so mass ends at 6 a.m. I got a text message from one of my friends who's, you could say the prominent one in the Muslim group that I used to hang out with, and she told me that she didn't want to know me anymore, that I was a horrible person, and she doesn't even wake up at 6 a.m. So that's another prayer, um, you know, answered. That's how God listens. That's how
Mm,
God does His works.
yeah.
Um, he took away the cancer from my life on my first ever mass.
Mm,
Uh, and I remember afterwards the priest was we had a conversation. He was like, "You're fatty?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fatty." Man. He was like, "Where have you been? It's been so long." I was like, "Yeah, I know." you know. And I remember they took me, they hugged me, and that's the love of Christ. And that priest who hugged me was actually an old service in church that was ordained a priest, and he had a lot of free time on his hands. He was just ordained. And that's another thing that God worked in, how He made that priest have enough free time. So we used to hang out, me and the priest. He used to teach me about Christ, teach me about the Bible, show me how to read the Bible. And since then, I started to walk. And that priest eventually got really busy because priests have a lot of service. But God made sure that I would learn from the priest uh, how to be a Christian. And ever since then, I went from someone who was into fornication, into a life of basically Satan, into someone serving at the altar of Christ on church. That is
wow.
something that bewilders anyone to think about. How can someone be transformed in such a way, going from absolute darkness to the absolute, you know, light of Christ? And that's my story.
I love that. Out of darkness into the light. And I loved when you said that he answered that prayer, God has to isolate you. You said it pretty profoundly about you're isolated to clear out the voices that aren't him. And he did that and you were able to see clearly. So that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thankful for the Lord, because if it wasn't for Him, I wouldn't be here today. I would be somewhere else, not good, and I wouldn't really know the taste of goodness.
Mm.
And you know, I'm happy that I'm finally here. God actually took me to the States. I wasn't thinking about it, but He took me somewhere away from all the ruckus and all the noise of
Wow.
the Arab world, and that's another great thing that I'm grateful for. And
You're
yeah,
seeing the goodness. Yes, you're seeing the goodness of God in your life, and He's answering your prayers. And so, tell us now, Fadi, that now that you're in the States, and what do you feel like He's calling you to? Where are you at in your walk with the Lord?
so fantastic question, Julie. People who usually move continents, emphasis on continents. I moved. 18 hours on a plane away from home, they usually have a really tough start, um, and they'd have a lot of struggles. But by the grace of God, the moment I went into America, I remember used to ask me like, "What are you gonna do when you go to America?" Because America is America. I was like, "I don't know, whatever God wills." And I remember they used to think that I'm crazy. Even my own family, they thought I was crazy. They were like, What do you mean?" And the moment, Julie, I went into America, I was completely supported from my family, my distant relatives, and had a home. I was even driving a car on the get like on the first day, and I went to church, and the people from church were so nice and were so kind. And I actually met a girl that I'm actually dating from church, from Sunday school, that like I really want her to be my partner in life and my wife instant like on the first like 10 days. That's not normal. And I even came to America because a priest was visiting a Kuwait's church and actually told me that he needs me in America. And that's amazing. So when I went to that church, Julie, in California, so I first started off in New Jersey, went to California, and the church I'm attending, the church that I'm part of, half of them came from Kuwait. So I don't feel like I'm in a different country because these people I knew from my childhood or I knew of and they know me or they know my family. So I actually don't feel like I'm 18 hours away from home. I feel like I'm home. And ever since then I started to pray to God, God, please reveal to me what you want me to do here. What is it that you want? Like now I can see the goodness. Now I see if you trust in the Lord, this is what the Lord will do for you. I'm sitting at a home. I'm eating food. I'm not struggling and every single member of the church that I talked to that moved to the states said that they didn't feel the pain of someone who's typically an immigrant. They feel like God is holding them, and God started to reveal to me what He wants me to do, and I feel so grateful now that I have a path in America. I have a new home. I remember I was on the phone with a lawyer yesterday, and he told me that I am practically just like any U.S. citizen now, except that the fact that I can't vote. So I am home, um, and that goes to show, Julie, that the earth is the Lord's. And I'll tell you something. I remember when my parents were telling me, "What are you gonna do in the states? Where are you gonna go? How are you even gonna get the visa?" Because for non-U.S. citizens, the getting a U.S. visa is very difficult, and it takes up to months for you to get approved. Or even like months for you to see someone at the embassy, and you would be lucky if even then you'd be approved. I got everything done within 2 days, and I remember when I told my mom the earth is the Lord's. It's not ours. It's
Mm.
not any president's land. It's not the land of anyone. It's the land of God, and there's no bureaucracy. There's no paperwork that gets in the way of God. If God wants something to work, to work. And I remember I believe the first day in America, when I stepped foot into the States, I was at Walmart and I saw this big sign, a big poster in Walmart that says, "The earth is the Lord's." And this is how I knew that God is the king of everything. And this is how he was telling me that, hey, you're right, the earth is mine. uh,
Yeah. You know what I love about that is,
yeah,
yes, the earth is the Lord's, and you are operating in such great faith by taking these steps. You don't know in your natural mind, but you feel like He's leading you. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding, and He'll direct your paths. And you put your faith in Him, and the earth is the Lord's. And it's funny. I just read something recently where faith is exercised on earth. It's the only place it's exercised because when we're in
yeah,
heaven, that faith is going to have sight. So,
exactly. The things unseen are greater than the things that are seen. So yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
remember like it was insane, telling people that, hey, Canada, US, Uganda, Kenya, Europe, it's all God's, and they think you're
Mhm.
crazy, but it's true. It's really true.
Yeah. Again, Fadi, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with us your amazing testimony. And as we close today, can you just briefly share one last thing on your heart between what Islam did for you versus what Jesus did for you?
Oh yeah, of course. So basically, Julie. The difference between Islam and Christianity is practically the same difference as hell between heaven. Islam, on the surface, looks very nice, or at least what they teach you looks very nice. But Islam is an actually it's a very controlling religion. And what I mean by that is, look at how oppressed the women are in Islam. Look at how they're not allowed to reveal their face. They're not allowed to even speak. Their voice is filthy. It's written in the Quran that the woman's voice is filthy. And look at how they're they're treated. They can't travel without a guardian. You're not allowed. Women in Islam are not allowed to marry without their father's approval. So the woman I wanted to marry back then loved me so much. Her whole family supported the marriage except for her dad, and her dad was the most important part because her dad's approval was needed for her to get married. So it's like you're approving the sale of something. It's not like you're not treating marriage as a humanly thing. And one thing that why I touch on women's right a lot in Islam is because it's a very big issue. You have even a marriage contract. So when we get married, or when Christians get married, or when Jews get married, I'll focus on Christianity. So when Christians get married, they have a marriage contract. And in Christianity, marriage is a union between man and woman. And it's not a unity that's direct. What glues them together is Christ and faith. And they're married and they live their life and they only marry once and they're not allowed to separate. And what separates them, what bonds them together is Christ, and only so Christ can separate them if. But in Islam, marriage is only seen as the pleasure for a male. And what I'll prove to you is that in Islam, marriage contract is actually called sex contract. Now, that's a fact that not a lot of people know. But in Islam, the word for sex is nikah. And it says it very clearly in the contract that it says it's a sex contract. And that the woman is only there to please a man. And if a woman doesn't feel like pleasing the man has the right to divorce her. That is a huge
Wow.
difference because tells us to treat our wives as the weaker vessel and respect them and that we be subject to each other and that the woman has the control on the man's body and the man has the control of the woman's body and that they're both equal, but not in Islam. Another thing in Islam that is very, 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 you know, uh, bad is that it says that God is the best of deceivers. So Allah in Islam is God, and Allah is the best of deceivers. Now, Julie, me and you, because we have information on the Bible and obviously the viewers, what does it say in the Bible? It says that Satan is the best of deceivers. Satan is very manipulative, Julie, because in Islam, Allah asks the Muslims to lie in wait on the roads for the non-believers and ambush them, and force them to convert to Islam. And if they don't convert to Islam, you can kill them. So lie in wait and murder them. And but if they do agree to be Muslims, so leave them be. Now, does that ring a bell, Julie? Does that ring a bell to you? Do you know how ISIS works?
Mhm.
ISIS does the same exact thing. In Egypt, they did two attacks on Christians on the road where there was a bus going to the monastery, and they stopped the bus mid-road. They ambushed them, and they forced them to convert to Islam, but none of them did, and all of them were martyred. Islam is a religion of violence. It's not a religion of peace. I can go on for days on why Islam is like that. Islam uh, teaches actually there is a verse in one of the hadiths. So the hadith is like what adds on to the Quran. Now, a lot of Muslims will say, "Oh, but the hadith is not essential. The Quran is essential." But the Quran says the Quran is nothing but the hadith. So that's just for people who might attack and say, "Oh no, in the hadith it says that black people go to hell. Black people are not allowed to go to heaven," and that you and I, Julie, we are non-believers, so we are horrible. We're kafirs. Muslims go to hell temporarily, so for 300 years, for 400 years, and that it says in the Quran that non-believers bear the sins of the believers. So when God takes out those Muslims from hell and takes them to the 72 virgins in heaven, me and you replace those people in hell, and we carry their sins. That's the difference
Mm.
between Islam and Christianity. Jesus bore our sins. Jesus paid for our very hefty bill that we couldn't afford, and He paid it
Yes.
once and for all.
Yes.
But Allah doesn't care. Allah sees us as slaves in the Quran, but our God sees us as as His children. That's the biggest difference. I'm sorry it took a long time to explain, but this is how people should know the difference.
Well, and I like how you said Jesus Christ is God and God is love. I would love for you to pray us out today, Fadia, on that note.
Of course. And I would love to pray on behalf of everyone, on behalf of you, on behalf of myself, Julie, because God is love and love should be shared with everyone. So, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. God, Jesus Christ, I thank you so much for everything that you have given me, for everything that you've given Julie, and everything that you've given your children. I also like to thank you for the opportunity you gave me today to share the word of Christ with everyone, with the people, to be able to have people who are in doubt or viewers who are thinking about converting to actually come to you, Lord. Because at the end of the day, Lord, nobody goes to heaven but through you. And today I ask you to bless us, to give us our daily bread,
Mhm.
to give us that endurance
Mhm.
to go on days on earth until we meet you
Yes.
again. Thank you, Lord. And
Yes.
thank you, Julie.
Yes. Yes. Jesus. Jesus' name. Amen.